All right, let's jump right in. We're going to explore this really powerful ancient idea, one that connects something as specific as fossil records in Pakistan to, well, the entire architecture of the cosmos. It's called the geometry of God. You know, at the heart of all this is a question we've all probably asked ourselves at some point. Is everything just random chaos, or is there some kind of hidden order, a pattern underneath it all? Well, for thousands of years, people across art, science, and faith have been circling around the same answer, and it's this. The universe isn't just ordered. Its order is mathematical. It's something we can understand, and it's beautiful. That is the geometry of God. Okay, so to really get into this, our journey is going to start with a story. It's a tale of two competing geometries, and it's explored so brilliantly in Uzma Aslam Khan's novel, which is actually also called The Geometry of God. The whole thing is set in Pakistan during the pretty repressive Zia regime. So what the novel does is set up this incredible conflict. On one side, you've got what you could call the static geometry of dogma. Think rigid rules, walls, exclusion. It's embodied by the state's ideology of the veil and four walls. But then on the other side, you have this fluid geometry of discovery, something that's always evolving, that's all about connection, asking questions, and looking at the evidence. And this whole conflict, it's not just an idea, it's brought to life through these four key characters. First, there's Zahor. He's a paleontologist, and he's sort of a rational mystic. Then you have his granddaughter Amal, who's the empirical observer. She sees what's there. Her sister, Mahwish, is blind, but she's the intuitive seer. And finally, there's Noman, this conflicted modern guy who's just caught between all these different ways of seeing the world. Zahor's whole perspective is really summed up perfectly in this quote: "Nothing is discovered, everything is revealed." See, for him, science isn't some attack on faith. Not at all. It's just a way of reading God's creation. Finding a fossil isn't a contradiction of the Quran. It's just another one of God's verses, or ayats, that's finally being revealed to us. But here's the thing. This idea is so much older than this one novel. So let's zoom out a bit. Let's trace this timeless concept, this idea of a divine blueprint, all the way from its ancient roots right up to the scientific revolution. And when you do that, this amazing intellectual lineage just emerges. You start with Pythagoras, who literally thought he could hear a musical harmony in the cosmos. Then you get Plato, who saw divine perfection in these pure geometric shapes. That thread carries on to Kepler, who's trying to read God's mind by studying the planets. And it all leads up to Spinoza, who took the huge leap of saying God is nature. Okay, let's just focus on Plato for a second here. He was fascinated by these 5 unique shapes, the Platonic solids. And the key thing is, they're the only possible perfectly regular 3D shapes. That's it. And for him, the fact that there were only 5, well, that had to be proof of a rational creator, right? He figured these must be the building blocks for everything: fire, earth, air, water, and the entire universe. Now, Kepler, he's a really crucial turning point in this story. He started out totally convinced by Plato. He tried so hard to fit those perfect solids between the orbits of the planets. But the math, the actual data, it just didn't work. And this is huge. He had to abandon his beautiful, perfect idea and just accept what the evidence was telling him. Planets move at ellipses, not perfect circles. That was a monumental shift in thinking. It was the moment we went from trying to force our perfect ideas onto nature to actually listening and letting nature reveal its own messier, more complex geometry. And all of this thinking really culminates in Spinoza's radical idea, Deus sive natura. It means God or nature. For Spinoza, God isn't some king sitting on a throne up in the sky. No, God is the internal logic of the universe itself. The laws of nature, that's just God's reason at work. And right there, you see the philosophical twin of Zahor, the paleontologist from the novel. It's the exact same belief. To study nature is to study God. Okay, so now we're going to shift gears and turn to a completely different tradition, one where this idea found maybe its most sophisticated expression of all. We're going to dive into the silent theology of pattern in Islamic art and architecture. The whole philosophy here is built on a core Sufi concept called Wahdat-i Wujud. It basically means the unity of being. The idea is that all the crazy, infinite variety we see in the world, what they call the many, is really just a manifestation of one single unified divine reality, the One. So because of that, Islamic art is what you could call a silent theology. Think about it. Instead of using figures to tell a story like in a lot of Western religious art,
It uses these abstract geometric patterns. And the goal isn't to tell you a story, it's to evoke a feeling, a state of contemplation, to give you this wordless reminder of the universe's hidden unity.
And you can see this philosophy made real, made tangible in the art itself. Take tessellations, for example, those repeating tiles. They can extend out infinitely from just a single point, which is a perfect symbol for the creation of the many from the one. Or think about muqarnas, those incredible, intricate honeycomb vaults you see in mosques. They take something that looks solid, like stone, and break it down into countless tiny pieces. It's a way of suggesting that maybe the material world isn't so solid after all, that it's actually kind of ephemeral, and it's all being held in existence by this divine order.
All right, now we're going to take a really fascinating leap forward. We're jumping from ancient mysticism all the way to modern science to see if we can find nature's own infinite code. And what's wild is, we're going to find some pretty surprising echoes of these old ideas.
Let's talk about fractals. Now, I know they can seem really complex, but the magic behind them is actually pretty simple. You just start with a basic rule, like a simple equation. Then you repeat that process over and over and over again. And out of that simple repetition, you get this infinite complexity and beauty. This is the real geometry of the world around us. It's in coastlines, clouds, ferns, all the rough stuff that perfect shapes can't describe. And here is the crucial insight with fractals: self-similarity. It means any small piece you zoom in on looks just like the whole thing. The macrocosm is perfectly reflected in the microcosm. And isn't that incredible? It's a modern scientific discovery that echoes almost perfectly that ancient Sufi idea of finding the entire universe reflected inside the human heart. Okay, and that connection, it takes us right to the very edge of modern physics. We're going to talk about how we can start to reimagine the very fabric of reality. Yeah, we're talking about things like string theory, higher dimensions, and a whole new way of thinking about what transcendence even means. So think about this classic theological paradox. You find it in the Quran. How can God be described as closer than the jugular vein? I mean, that's about as intimate and present as you can get, and yet at the same time be completely transcendent, totally beyond our comprehension. Well, what if that whole old conflict, is God in the world or outside of it? What if it's based on a false premise? Maybe the answer has nothing to do with physical distance at all. Maybe it's about dimensions. Let me try to explain. Imagine a world called Flatland. It's totally 2D. The beings there live on a flat plane. They have no concept of up or down. Now, imagine you, a 3D being, looking at their world. You could see inside all of their locked rooms at the same time, right? Without ever actually entering their 2D plane. You'd be totally present to them, yet completely outside their reality. So, if we follow that analogy, a being in a higher dimension could be closer than our jugular vein, while still remaining completely and utterly beyond our 3D space-time. Okay, so let's bring all these threads together. We've gone from a conflict in a novel, to ancient philosophy, to Islamic art, and all the way to modern physics. And what it all seems to come down to is this idea of the bridge of human inquiry. It's about the choice we all have to make. Which geometry are we going to use to understand and build our world? And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. After everything we've looked at, do we think that geometry is the literal language that God speaks? Or could it be something even more profound? Is geometry the beautiful, logical bridge that our finite human minds build in our endless quest to try and understand something infinite?